Hey everyone, welcome to Rock Daydream Nation. Today's episode we cover our favourite songs from Mellon Collie and the Infinite Sadness by the Smashing Pumpkins. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and today I've got my mate from America, David Botas. How are you?
Very good, very good. Great to be here. I appreciate it.
Good stuff. We are going to cover the third album from the Smashing Pumpkins, and I'm talking about the smash hit Mellon Collie and the Infinite Sadness. So this album came out in 1995, was a smash hit all around the world. We're going to pick maybe our favorite tracks off the album, because this was a sprawling album, David. I think 28 tracks over two discs. As I said, it was a smash hit all around the world. In hit number one in America, 5 times platinum. I think they've converted that into a diamond status. I don't know if that's true or not. UK, it hit number 4, and Australia, it hit number 1. Now, Smashing Pumpkins were part of what they deemed to be the grunge movement, and these songs, many songs off this album were actually played on mainstream rock radio, and even are played to this very day. So, without further ado, David, hit me with one of your favorite songs off this album.
Well, it's hard to pick. There's 28 songs. I actually found out that on the vinyl version, there's 2 extra songs, and there's a completely different resequencing. In the original vinyl version, the re-release has the track listing that is on the traditional CD one. So my first pick I'm going to pick is the first song on disc 2, which is called Where the Boys Fear to Tread. Now, nice. I happen to love, it starts off with just a little bit of like a tension and suspense. And then all of a sudden the riff just starts building and building, and then it just goes into another heavy riff. One of the lyrics, all the lyrics on here are kind of like abstract. They're not linear, something to be comprehended in a linear fashion. So a lot of it's kind of doom and dark and gloomy and everything like that. It's very mid-90s, but I would not say that anything about this album is cliche at all. It's actually quite to the opposite. King of the Horseflies, Dark Prince of Death, his tragic forces are heaven sent. If that doesn't mention teenage angst, you know what I mean, and just all those different emotions that you're feeling at that time, I don't know what does. But I love that song. Yeah. It just grooves right in there. What do you think?
I think this album, with the CD age, you could cram a lot. Each disc was approximately 78 minutes. And there's a lot crammed in this album. And I think this is their White Album. It is epic. Yeah. It's cinematic. It's epic. And I think that is a cracker of a track, David, that kicks off disc 2. And to be quite frank, there weren't too many double discs that I can remember in the 90s. And for him, for Billy Corgan to put an album, a double LP, I call it LP, out in the mid-90s. I think it's really brave, audacious, and I think this probably is their masterpiece. And it's a great track. Great track.
Yeah, many people would say that. He drew parallels to Pink Floyd's The Wall quite a bit, and it definitely sounds, it's definitely a concept album. It could have been. It's like it could have been called like Ziggy Stardust and the Infinite Sadness, or Sgt. Pepper's Mellon Collie's Lonely Hearts Club Band or something like that. Yeah. It definitely harkens back to when you could do these elaborate things like Tommy or the rock operas, the big concept albums. It definitely, and I'll get into this more later, but it definitely is a statement that they really, really want to double down, that they're setting themselves aside from everybody else.
Absolutely. So that's a great opening pick, David. Well, my first pick is probably a little bit predictable. It's actually on the first disc, and it's the single, one of the many singles, and that's Tonight. And to me, it's like a grunge version of Born to Run. It's got that Springsteen feel to it, where the track gallops along, and it's got that beautiful instrumental orchestral backing. It's got light and shade. And reading a little bit into the background to this song, and I found it quite a little bit strange that it was Billy's tribute to Cheap Trick. And the lyrics, I love the sentiment. It's about believing in yourself, surviving, because I think it's on record that Billy had a very damaged childhood, and fame, how he was handling fame. And a lot of the themes of this album is how he is handling fame. So he's gone through a very damaged childhood and adolescence, and now he's got this fame, and how he's dealing with it, maybe not so successfully. And he's sort of writing about his feelings and expressing himself very directly through these lyrics. And I think Tonight is a wonderful sort of opener. It's not strictly the opener, because you've got that wonderful opening instrumental, which is called Mellon Collie and the Infinite Sadness. Which is like a kind of an overture to this song, if you want to talk, maybe on semantics. But Tonight to me is a wonderful track, and it definitely has to be part of my 6. Time is never time at all. You can never leave at all without leaving a piece of youth. And that kind of sums up this song, Tonight.
Yeah, I love that song. The music video, I think, won the MTV award right when it came out, like in '96.
How good were their videos in that era? Ooh. Brilliant.
Yeah, they were sort of like there was kind of a crabs in a bucket mentality going on with the alternative rock community, where when the Smashing Pumpkins ascended in popularity, there was a lot of like sort of snobby pushback where it was like, why them? It seems so random why they're the ones that are so important and so big. And besides Billy being very competitive and trying to always how should I put it? Like, he was trying to work within the system, but be as artistic as possible by, touring as much as they needed to, cranking out albums when they needed to. They had like a release like every year, it seemed. And just the fact that they were trying to do these expensive music videos for MTV, and they weren't shying away from that. It made them look like they were just sort of, I guess, like trying to follow along with their and sort of bow down to the corporate masters. But the irony is that you watch this stuff and it's nothing. It doesn't look anything like anything that was going on at that time. They're still keeping the authenticity to the band.
Yes.
And another point on that song is that the lyric is the first lyric that you sang or said. That's the first lyric you hear on the album. And it's and in a very kind of like a dark album, it's actually very uplifting. It's a very uplifting message, that the way that the album starts off. It's a beautiful, he says like, believe in me and just believe. Like, it's not really what people were saying around that time.
Yeah, and I've got to say something. I was watching a lot of the YouTube videos and reading people's comments, and so many comments were with people who've had darkness in their lives, even suicidal, and they found the light and through this album. And it's quite inspiring reading about people, how they sort of it touched them and how they related to this album. So he was certainly, I mean, the stats attest that it definitely sort of touched a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So what's your number 2?
Number 2, I will pick Jelly Belly. It's track 3.
I picked that as well. So you put your take up, mate.
Yeah. So to sort of like continue on what I was saying about how no one was giving like a message of positivity. I mean, the rest of the album is dark, but it's sort of like the lyric says, "Welcome to nowhere fast, nowhere here ever lasts." And for people that weren't alive in the 90s, or I was growing up at that time, I actually remember this album cycle. There was the whole 90s and Gen X vibe in alternative music, and just the sort of the modus operandi was like, who cares? Like, what am I going to do? Become a rock star? You know, this very like sort of cynical look at any type of ambition. Like you couldn't make a movie like Rocky from the 70s and the 90s. It just was going to get scoffed at. You couldn't talk about, you had to be raw, and you had to sort of like not, you almost sort of like, you had to just assume the role of an ordinary person that's never going to amount to anything. And any more than that is, and if you try to be competitive and you try to like climb the ladder, if you will, you're a fool and you're going to get nowhere, or you're like you're sort of like, you're a zombie, or you're a drone or something like that. It's very like dour times, like.
Absolutely. And the complete opposite to the shallow excesses of the Hollywood metal scene, what it was becoming in the early 90s, just before Nirvana breaking. I was just listening to this album, and especially that track, and saying this is a movement that had to happen.
Yeah, I guess like the thing is that things go to an extreme, and then they go to the other extreme, and you sort of got to try to figure out the balance between it. Because because the Pumpkins and everything like that were very, very ambitious, and they were making these big videos, and they wanted to be a big band with high concepts and use producers and do interviews on different channels, and I guess sort of like be in the public eye. This made them categorized by a lot of the bands that really could, they couldn't get arrested in certain cities and where they were touring. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they just looked at that like, why are you so important? It's just like, well, the people like it. If the people like the way the music sounds, let them like it. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with trying to be ambitious.
Absolutely. But getting back to Jelly Belly, I think that if you love your rock, guys, or viewers, if you love your classic rock, this has got a deep Black Sabbath-y kind of sped up stoner groove to it. The riff is important. The riff is king in this song. And I just couldn't imagine anyone who likes Black Sabbath or metal or hard rock would not like this song, because it's just so infectious.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's got that wall of sound, and Corgan's voice, and, people like it. Some people don't, but he's got that cut through, and it's kind of like almost sneering cut through over this really deep, progressive sort of, I wouldn't call it progressive, but the chord progressions on this song. It's like a wall of sound. It's magnificent. I think it's a great track.
Definitely. So what's your number 2?
That was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I said that earlier. I said we had the same one. So I appreciate your take, and yeah, that's my take. I agree with everything you said. I think it's just a wall of sound, and it just builds up. So the band is on fire. All right. What's your number 3?
All right. My number 3 is XYU, which is a little over 7 minutes long. And it's another one of these, it's sort of similar to the way that the Where the Boys Fear to Tread song is, where it starts off with this growing suspense and it gets heavy and this screaming going on. And I don't know what XYU means, but I do know that it's about a breakup or ex-girlfriend, the angst that you're feeling when you've just been either dumped or the relationship has just gone south. So I think that like Billy's when he writes these lyrics and the song titles, they tend to have these double meanings going on, or there's like a bit of wordplay going on. So I suppose like XYU means like X as an ex-girlfriend or ex-mate, and Y as in the question why, and then you like, why'd you do this to me? that's me conspiracy theorizing like the whole.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting take on that. Yeah. Another thing I want to add is the production of this album is really spick. So you've got Alan Moulder, who he's done a lot of work with a band that we did cover on this channel, My Bloody Valentine, and Ride. He's involved, and Flood, who's well known for doing work with U2 and Depeche Mode. So you've got some top-notch talent working on the production of this album, and it just sounds superb.
Well,
as you would expect.
Yeah, I was watching an interview, and Flood was saying the reason why they grabbed him was because he was known to be a producer for bands that wanted to basically dismantle their sound and come up with something radically different than the last one. The first two albums were produced by Butch Vig, and they didn't have a falling out. At that time, he was kind of working with starting Garbage and everything.
Yes.
But I think that they just really figured if we want to sound different, we got to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So one of the things about Mellon Collie is that they Flood forced them to kind of get in the band, practice together. The last two albums were not recorded with all the band members playing on them. Billy was a more sophisticated musician than Darcy, the bassist, and Jimmy Iha, like the other guitarist. So they only had a certain amount of time to record. So they were like, well, we can either keep trying to do these complicated parts and rack up the studio time, and then that goes like the cost goes up, or we could just have Billy go on there and since he wrote the demo, just bang them out. So he basically had them sort of jam for a good hour, and then they'd get that danger back. And that's what he wanted to do. It seemed like Siamese Dream, the album before that, which was a massive hit, was very perfect. And he felt like they should get this. They should get back this. Billy used the term ferocity back into the sound, and that's why it's a much more aggressive album. And the other thing about this album that he wanted them to do is that they had to set themselves aside from all those other grunge bands because of how perfect Siamese Dream ended up being. It just seems a lot more like a collection of great songs as far as like being like a concept album.
Doesn't hang together as well.
Yeah, he basically was telling them, we're not cut from the same cloth as we're not influenced by the same bands. We like guitar solos like the 70s, like Zeppelin. We like art rock like the Beatles. We should be compared to that type of song. We're not doing, sort of this extension of Jesus and the Mary Chain or something like that. Even though that they do have those influences, they had much like wider net of influences. And
absolutely, yes,
yeah. In order to set themselves aside, they're like, well, you guys want to see how different we are? We're going to make this like 28-track giant concept album that has all these different elements that you're not really getting from Stone Temple Pilots or Pearl Jam or anything like that. And that's kind of why they kind of got Flood in there, and it was part of the whole like what they were shooting for on purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, these guys are a petri dish of influences that go back to classic rock, and much more prevalent than a lot of their contemporaries. I think a lot of their contemporaries had a smaller dish of influences comparative to Smashing Pumpkins. I think they go right back to the early part of classic rock. All right, so my next pick is Bullet with Butterfly Wings. I'm being very predictable, but I've got to play it as I see it, David. I think this song absolutely slaps. It's just it's top 5 Smashing Pumpkins. It's got that sneering anger. It's got a beautiful riff, and it's got that famous. It's part of pop culture. Despite all my rage, I'm still a rat in the cage, and a lot of people feel like that. It's a song to the masses that are oppressed, downtrodden, class trapped. I love it. I'll read you a direct quotation as best as I can transcribe from Billy himself about this song, because I think he was on Howard Stern and he was asked about the meaning behind this song. And he said, "The song's true message has grown on me over the years, as I find it to be a withering attack on the lameness of fame," as he said earlier. "Who could have known then that the glory of fame would be an even more important commodity in the 21st century?" So, words directly from Billy. It's a deep groove. It's full of drama. It's got light and shade. And I mean, you know, they say about the Pixies. Pixies were the architects of that, the light and shade, but these boys can turn it on as well, or boys and girls. And Billy Corgan's vocals are just fantastic. Really, the synergy of everyone on this track is just perfect.
Oh, I love that song. What was interesting is when that was a hit, it would be played on the radio back to back with like the Macarena. Because this was back then it was like, this band was so big that they crossed over to a heavy band crossover to the pop market. And it's just interesting that I remember like what I was listening to. Mariah Carey was on the radio, and then it'd be like the Macarena, and then, soon to be the Spice Girls, and then, Smashing Pumpkins. So,
just in that little grab, that's 90s.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right, mate. What's your next pick? Number 4. I think it's number 4.
Next one is I'm going to pick Muzzle. Okay. I actually saw them play this live on the 2011 tour that they did right before they released their album Oceania. And back then they were sort of notorious for playing whatever they wanted to play and not just going to play the hits every time you go to a show. So most of the songs that were on that tour, or at least the show that I saw, were rather new. And then as an encore, I believe they played Bullet with Butterfly Wings, and then they played Muzzle. Now, I love Muzzle because Muzzle is a song that he wrote about basically himself and the way that he's viewed in public. He's very opinionated and he's outspoken, and he'll tell you like it is. And sometimes it's the ugly truth. So he was really looked at as kind of like an a-hole at times, because he would just give a comment that wasn't like, he'd make a comment that wasn't the nicest comment. I'll just leave it like that. Especially when talking
not politically correct.
Yeah. And I guess that compromised his view of when people listen to him talk about pain. So like, if it's like, for instance, Axl Rose, like you listen to him and he's talking about how angry he is or how sad he is. If you had seen him in the public eye and you're like, oh, that guy's a jerk, you can't empathize with that person's pain anymore. It almost seems like it's too dichotomous now that you can't relate to it. You can't engage with it. So he one of the lines in it, he says, have you ever heard the words I'm singing in these songs? It's for the girl I've loved all along. And that just strikes towards the self-awareness that this band has. He knew, I don't think there's any other moments. I haven't looked at every single lyric because it's quite a long album, but I know that song was specifically written about the public view of him. And the fact that he's writing about something. Most of these lyrics are very abstract. And then all of a sudden he just sort of breaks the fourth wall. It's like he looks into the camera, Ferris Bueller style, and is like, do you know why I'm like this? Like, do you know these songs you're listening to on this album right now? You know what I mean? I thought that was excellent. That was just like such a cool moment. He's aware that of how, he's being seen. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I love about that. Plus it was a promo single. It didn't have a video, but it definitely sounds like it would have been a radio, just as much of a radio hit as the other ones were that were released as singles. Yeah.
No, that's a really good pick. It's pretty tough coming up with 5 or 6 out of this album because there's so many great songs on this album. So I really appreciate the this being a bit of a tough assignment. I'm going to go a bit more of a deep dive track. I'm going to go 33 with my next. I think it's a bit more of a simple song, but it's got these nice country flavor guitars, and speaking with the words of what Billy said about this song, he said, hope is really like the key in life because one must have hope and faith to actually get out of bed and do anything in the world. With everything happening in his life, i.e. fame, he just wanted a happy home. And this is what the lyrics and this song relate to. And it's got, as I said, simple arrangements, but it's deeply personal and it's quite affecting to listen to. And there's a lot of religious imagery in this album, mentioning like Jesus. And somebody had a theory that Jesus died at 33. And this song's called 33. So there's references to the Messiah. So there's a fair amount of religious imagery, quite interesting on this album.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's actually the video that I never even knew existed when I was a kid. Some of the other singles all the other singles had these videos, and that's the only one that I hadn't seen it. I think it was because it was like the last video that came out from the album. The album was already like a year into its cycle because it was just not. But yeah, that one is definitely, when you think of, I think Billy said this on an interview once. It's kind of like Led Zeppelin, where a lot of people know like Whole Lotta Love and Communication Breakdown. They know like these heavy songs, and Billy's known for the most popular ones like Butterfly Wings or like Cherub Rock. And they overlook that there's all this other slower stuff, softer stuff that's going on these albums.
Yes.
Because it's popular.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
There's a lot more light than people would assume just from the way that they've been marketed, like in the on radio and on TV and stuff like that.
Yeah. Spot on. All right. So what's your I think it's 6 pick. What's your song?
I think we're on 4. No, we're on 5.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem. Let's see. 5, I'm gonna pick Tales of a Scorched Earth. This is just a rage fest. I mean, this is the hardest song on the album, I would think. He's screaming into some sort of filtration. I don't know what they do with audio, excuse me, with the audio vocals of recording, but he's screaming into some sort of box. So that way it sounds like he's screaming as loud as he possibly can, but you're not hearing it like that. And the song, just as you said before, just like slaps. Like this thing just keeps hitting you and hitting you and hitting you. So if you're in a pissed off mood, this is a song to listen to. I mean, like you mentioned how he's relating to, you mentioned this in 33, but he was going through a divorce at this time. So a lot of that was ending up on the album. Yes. The lyric goes, I lie just to be real and I die just to feel. Why do the same old things keep on happening?
Well, some of the greatest works of music have come out of personal pain, like the blues. So he's certainly he's pretty blue on this album, lyrically. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. There's a lot of feelings of loneliness and sadness and disillusionment. Just having a lack of fulfillment, even though you've sort of made it, there's still another, you sort of like reach the end of this level in Super Mario, and then the next level's got a whole new boss that shows up, and you have to try to take away that, like, what do you call it? Antagonist. In this sense, they're working against the success that they had already from the last album. So, I think that Tales from a Scorched Earth is kind of a theme. A lot of the songs I'm picking are more the heavier ones, but there's a lot of good stuff here that's on the lighter side, like 33, like the pick that you had.
Yeah. Well, the next one I'm going to pick is Galapagos. I think this is one of his most emotionally affecting songs. It's delicate, it's melancholy, and Corgan's voice is very warm and reassuring. As I said, there's a fair amount of criticism about his voice, that it can be a little bit harsh, but I think he's putting his warm tones that his vocals tonality can allow to wash over these wonderful lyrics. As everyone's aware, if you read, the Billy Corgan story, he had an awful childhood. And I think the lyrics in this song relate to being in a relationship, but reverting to feelings of abandonment and loss and trying to adjust to change. So if you go through something really traumatic in a previous life, and even though you may be sort of happy or should be happy, you're still questioning, like, I should be happy, but I've got so much baggage from what happened in the past. It's very hard to adjust. And I think this is what this song reflects. And it's deep, it's emotional. I love this lyric, and it really speaks to me. Carve out your heart for keeps in an old oak tree and hold me for goodbyes and whispered lullabies. This guy is a poet.
Yeah.
Davey?
Yeah. I like what you're talking about right now is it's because it's the same thing that in the last lyric I said, like, why does these things keep happening to me? I mean, even after he gets this great success, he gets a divorce, right? This album comes out, and then there's all this trials and tribulations where it becomes this juggernaut, and then the drummer ends up like almost ODing on heroin. The keyboardist, like touring keyboardist, OD'd on heroin. So like every time he like gets something, there's still this like enemy that's here to sort of like rain on the parade.
It's like that damn song, I Can't Be Happy Today. It's just, he should be happy, but, fame and success has its downside. And I think that he's sort of expressing the downside in spades.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's tough. Some of these things come from within, but it's like, then what are you supposed to do when when outside forces are continuously so reinforcing that you can't just have your own little utopia, I guess. But
yeah, absolutely. What's your next pick?
Let's see. Next pick, I'm gonna pick Bodies. This is another, as you say, a cracker. This is I try to understand like what he was trying to say in the lyrics here, and it's about, again, a breakup. I think he's talking about the physical relationship, the actual body. He's doing sort of like a play on the fact that, you get your first relationship when you're a youth, when you're younger, and then eventually that's the first person that you kiss, and so on, and then that's all this great, wonderful thing. But as soon as the breakup happens, you now have to deal with like the opposite end of that spectrum, the opposite end of that
whirlwind.
Yeah, that whirlwind. So like there is something to be said for how there's a psychological attachment to just the physical aspect of having somebody around. Some people like physical touch is one of those language of love categories. And I think he's musing on that. And he's also musing on the fact that people just, I think he says empty bodies like a couple times. I think it's how you thought you knew someone, you spoke to them, you engaged with them, you knew what their mind was thinking, their emotions, and now they're nothing to you. There's someone who I used to know, like that song, like they're in the same body, but they're not the same person at all. And you just have to sort of, I guess you think like, well, is everybody like that? Is everybody just a different collection of different stages and what's going on in their head? And it just really like underscores like being ripped apart from something that you didn't suspect that you're going to be ripped apart from.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Well said. No, I agree. Again, another very emotional, affecting lyric, and there are many on this album. So no, that's a great pick. Well, I'll finish up with my final pick. I think we're up to the final picks because I was losing count. I'm just so engrossed by this conversation. Yeah. It's predictable, David, but I've got to go 1979, and it's probably my favorite Smashing Pumpkins track on the album. It's either between that and Bullet with Butterfly Wings, but I love 1979. It's got a nice groove to it, and I love the warm sentiment of looking back at one's life as a teenager, as an adolescent, and being a child of the 70s, I relate to a lot of this, and the experiences, and I just think it's a wonderful song, and it was a kind of a bit of a hit in Australia. Did that get plenty of radio airplay in America?
Oh yeah, nonstop. I'm still not tired of it. I that's one of the songs I never get tired of hearing. I loved it when I was a kid. I still love it now. And I think it's important that he included that, because a lot of these other songs are not so overtly mentioning that he's connecting with, because you got to remember, these are people in their 20s, approaching 30, and they're making music that really appeals to children and preteens and teenagers. So there's kind of like this odd dynamic there, where you're talking about things that you've sort of moved on from, or you've certainly gotten over certain things. But I think it was important for him to put that in there to show, like, yeah, back when I was a teen, I felt this same way too. These feelings are still going on.
Absolutely. And this is a song that I've seen in sports shows where they've used the music to it. You know how they use background music for sports shows and clips. They've used this, the theme from 1979. So it's sort of almost semi into pop culture. This song, it's such a crossover song.
Yeah, that's, like I said, that song was getting pop radio play like nobody's business. I love it too. I could have picked that one. I could have picked a lot of the picks that you had.
Yeah.
It's a long album, but it's not. That doesn't mean that it should have been trimmed down to just one disc.
That's becoming a cliche, isn't it? Oh, it's a great album, but it would have made a great single album. But I think in this case, I wouldn't change a thing.
You know what? I was figuring you might mention Zero as one of your picks, because that was like a big hit too. Are you familiar with this, with the character, the story arc, and how this album's a part of a trilogy and everything like that?
Please share it with us.
Zero is the character that is supposedly going through this day of life on the album. And if you notice, like, and I don't know if this was intentional, but I know he was channeling Roger Waters in The Wall. I remember seeing Roger Waters playing The Wall back in 79, 80, and he was wearing like a baseball ringer similar to what I'm wearing right now, and it had a number 1 on it. And when you saw Billy at certain times, he'd have a shirt that says Zero on it, and Zero is the name of the character. The second album in Zero's story arc was their 5th album, Machina, which came out in 2000, and the Zero turned into Glass on that album. And then currently, right now, the Smashing Pumpkins are releasing the 3rd part of this trilogy, which is their new album called Autumn. He's releasing it in 3 parts. The first part came out like around November. The second part came out like last week, and the 3rd part is being released in April, I believe. And altogether, each part of this album is 11 tracks, so it ends up being 33, which is a callback again to the Mellon Collie album. But on that album, the character is called Shiny. So it goes through this progression where Zero is just a kid who's lost in the world. And then Glass on that album, on the Machina album, is now a rock star who has this like messiah complex going on. And then, the new one is kind of like taking that character into a different level. Billy specifically has done this in the past, where he doesn't want to release a whole long list of songs for an album. And he sort of tried to compartmentalize you sort of try to tear down the releases, so that way people don't have so much that they don't know where to go and get intimidated by it. So I think that's interesting that even right now, this album is still sort of the Mellon Collie story is just about to get finished, this year.
No.
So
yeah,
that's cool.
I didn't know that, so thank you for that. That's really interesting. I think history will judge this band very kindly. They're definitely one of the bands of the 90s that were sort of led that movement, grunge movement, rightly or wrongly, if you want to attach that label with this band. But they were one of the premier bands of the 90s. And I think if you look at history books and look at the topic about the 90s, alongside Nirvana and Pearl Jam, I think Smashing Pumpkins are right up there, and they're still. I think their reputation's fairly intact, even though they may not sell as many albums or trouble the upper reaches of the charts. I think their reputation with their first 3 albums has assured them a place in rock history. So, you deliver the goods yet again, David. Thank you very much, my friend. Always enjoy having you on the show. We're going to do some more stuff. Maybe some more 90s stuff, but I really appreciate you can see David on the Contrarians. And please, viewers, tell us what you think of the Smashing Pumpkins, what you think of this particular album. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation, and I can assure you, me and David will be doing a show very soon. Cheers.
Cheers.